Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening for the latest discussion on moving forward on pay, why nursing staff deserve a pay rise. I'm your chair for this evening, Teresa Fife, RCN Director of Scotland. We've held a good number of these sessions so far, and they have been well attended, and feedback has been very positive, and people have found them to be very helpful. If you missed previous sessions, they are available to watch on the website. Our Fair Pay for Nursing campaign is having an impact. And tonight, I'll be putting the questions you have about the campaign to Graham Reevy, Chair of the Trade Union Committee, and Norman Provan, Associate Director, Employment Relations. We will do our very best to answer as many of your questions as we can over the next hour. You can post these questions using the Q&A function. And you'll see a message coming up soon to say that's open. I think it's there now. It is. It's now live. So on you go with getting your questions up there. If we don't get through all the questions this evening, there will be further webinars in the coming weeks. A recording of this event will also be available on the website in the coming days, so you can catch up there. So I'm going to put our first question to Graham. I am going to ask him to introduce himself just in case you don't know who he is, because he thinks he doesn't need to. So over to you, Graham, to introduce yourself, and then I'd like to ask you a question, but I'll get you to say hello first.
Hello and good evening, everyone. It's good to be back again. I'm Graham Reevy. I'm the chair of the RCN UK Stewards. No, I'm not. I'm chair of the RCN Trade Union Committee. I'm the Scottish representative to the Trade Union Committee. I'm a steward and a workplace representative in NHS 24. So thank you very much for letting me mess that one up right away, Teresa.
So now you can see why I asked him to tell him who he is. So anyway, first question to you, Graham. The Fair Pay for Nursing campaign has been running for 3 weeks now. What has the reaction been?
Well, being honest around this is, I think that the reaction to the pay campaign has been, I would say, on the whole, very, very favourable. It's mainly been launched in social media so far, and basically the amount of interest that's been generated on social media has been, I would say, exceptionally high. There were some competing sort of RCN influences which actually took some of the sort of attention away from that. But I'm very content with the way that it's been launched. I'm very content in the way that it's progressing, and I'm very content with the amount of attention that it's been receiving on social media. I think that with all the webinars and all the information sharing that we've been doing across this, it's been something that I think has actually engaged with the members a bit more, and I think members are recognising that. There are activities that are going to be planned as we go through this. The one activity that I would probably say at the moment that we're pushing for people to do is actually to try and get some videos recorded of why nursing, and specifically I'm speaking to the Scottish audience now, why we deserve a 12.5% pay increase in Scotland, because that is what we will need to influence the politicians going forward. So it takes about a minute of your time, and it's well worthwhile. It'd be really, really good if we could get a real good representative sampling of what it means for the people of Scotland. I know that I've been pushing the buttons on a number of people that I know. I know that Norman's been putting the cosh on others, and I know that Teresa has also. So we're very keen to get that volume of publicity there. As far as the pay campaign's going, Teresa, I'm content, and I'm content with the fact that I know this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So there's going to be periods of heavy activity, and then there's going to be quieter periods in between. So we just need to capitalise where we can.
Thank you for that, Graham. Norman, can you please introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask you a question, but I'll let you say hello first.
Hi everyone, I'm Norman Provan. I'm Associate Director of the RCN in Scotland, and I'm responsible for doing the wage negotiation in Scotland, and I also sit on Staff Council, which does UK pay bargaining.
Great. Can you explain the relationship between Westminster and Scottish Government when it comes to NHS Pay, Norman?
Sure. Historically, pay for all of the 4 nations in the UK was determined at UK level through Staff Council, which is a body that brings the employers, government and the trade unions together, and it would normally be arranged there. The government have a couple of options open to them. They can either use the pay review body mechanism, which is what they normally use, and in that they submit evidence as to the employers and the trade unions, and the pay review body comes up with independent view about what pay should be. They make a recommendation to the UK government, and normally they can then choose whether to accept it or not accept it. The other possibility is that the UK government can choose not to use the pay review body mechanism, and on occasion they have done that and chosen to directly negotiate with the trade unions, and that's what they did 3 years ago. Now, normally, whatever is settled in terms of NHS Pay at a UK level, each of the 4 nations would then get a share of that money to do the same deal through a formula called the Barnett formula. So anything that's negotiated on a UK basis, Scotland would get its share. 3 years ago, the UK government chose to not allow any of the devolved nations to be involved in the negotiations that they were doing, and they did a deal that was for England only. And each of the other nations then were given a pot of money to do their own deal. And at that point in time, Scottish Government decided to do a deal that was structured differently from the rest of the UK. And this time round, it's become quite clear that the Scottish Government now consider the old 4-country mechanism to be redundant. So it looks likely now that the Scottish Government, in fact, will go alone, and we will have separate pay bargaining in Scotland established. They have already stated that they're not going to use the pay review body, but we will still get our share of whatever the UK one is to help do the deal in Scotland.
Thank you for that, Norman. There's a first question in which kind of follows from what you've been saying, so I'll pass it to you, Norman. It says, and there's a lot of mixed messages out there around this. When can we realistically expect a pay rise in Scotland?
That's a really good question. What we do know is that we're going to have separate pay bargaining in Scotland, but realistically, as at least some of the pot of money that will be used to do the deal in Scotland comes from the UK deal, there is a relationship between when the UK deal settles and when the money will become available in Scotland to do a deal. We need to remember that realistically at this moment in time, what we are talking about is a pay deal that should come into effect from the 1st of April next year. Although we, along with the other trade unions, have written to all 4 governments in the UK and have stated that in the year coming we want to bring the negotiations forward to do them earlier, and we want the pay deal brought forward. And what we mean by that is, instead of waiting to the 1st of April next year for people in the NHS to get a pay rise, we are asking governments to bring that forward. So for example, they could bring it forward to January or December, and instead of getting 12 months pay rise next year, you would get 15 or 16 months pay rise in a 12-month period. However, as it seems likely that the UK government will use a pay review body, the most likely scenario is that it will be closer to April next year before that is eventually settled. It might actually be past April next year until that is settled. But if that is the case, it will then be backdated to either the 1st of April, as it normally would be, or earlier if they agree to the bring forward. Certainly we know that the Scottish Government are keen to do the negotiations quite quickly, but there is that complication of it being tied to the amount of money that will come out of the UK deal. I suspect that we will be in a 9-month campaign year. I think it will be right up to the wire until such time as we know substantially what the NHS Pay award is going to be.
Great, thank you. Graham, I'm going to read out a comment that was on social media just before we started, and I wonder if you'd like to just make a response to this. And it was somebody who said, as much as I'd love a pay rise, it feels a bit selfish to be asking more at a time of such financial instability for the country, knowing that lots of people will lose their employment and income entirely. And this is from Erin, who is down in Cornwall.
Oh, that's a cracker, isn't it? Because that's just so typical of us as being nurses, and actually having that total society view on the way things are. And the way things, you know, we have a complete understanding and awareness of where we are in an economic environment which is not which is not a friendly environment because of COVID and because of all the sort of social turmoil that's been introduced, not to mention what's coming down the road with Brexit, etc. So we understand all that. But I think for me, the real thing here is about the value of nursing and how nurses and how people see the value of nursing, because that's where the hub of the matter comes in. Because what's happened is that when we done our survey, just over 30% across the country, but in particular in Scotland, this figure is 38% of nurses have indicated to us that they would leave the profession, and they would leave the profession for the primary reason of pay being one, safe staffing, and then the working environment following closely behind that. So for me, there's an economic choice that the government needs to make here, and that's an economic choice on whether they want to invest in the health service. Now, when I say invest in the health service, this isn't about building new hospitals. It's not about the structures that are sitting within the health service. What it is investing in the people that are the glue and basically are the structure that holds the health service in place. If you didn't have any nurses in the health service, where would we be? There wouldn't be a health service. And the other aspect of that is, if you take 30% of the nurses out of the health service right now and looked at how that would affect an impact on patient care, it would have a really significant impact on patient care. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. That pandemic seems to be getting worse. Our demand on nursing staff is going to do nothing more than increase, and the stresses on nursing staff are going to do more than increase over this period of time. So I completely understand the what could I say, the emotion behind the question, but I think there is a period of time to actually say, well, actually, you do need to invest in nursing. You do need to invest in the health service, and you do need to invest in patient care. And that's the way I would answer that question. Teresa, I don't know if Norman's got anything else to add to that.
I just, before Norman does the follow through, really, you made a comment, and I will come back to Norman as well. And the next question relates to what you indicated. We're all waiting here tonight to hear the next news with regard to COVID and what the implications are going to be for our lives and how we live them. So how do you think a second wave of COVID will impact on the pay campaign?
Well, the impact on the pay campaign is already being felt, because actually we have various mechanisms of lockdown throughout the country. We can't go and we can't walk around the wards and campaign in the way that we normally would do. We're having to use social media as the main platform to actually raise that. You can't actually have the social life round about that where you can actually go and meet people in, you know, pubs and restaurants and actually spread the word through the public in that space. All demonstrations seem to be getting pulled left, right and centre, so there's no public visibility of the campaign unless we are going to create it. So it's got that impact already. And that's one of the challenges that I'm wanting to speak over, and it's certainly one of the challenges I'm going to be speaking over when I'm doing the webinar on Wednesday with the representative communities, because actually it's what can we do and what do we do differently, and start to get feedback on how that campaign can run. Now, the campaign is adaptable and can change, and if things start to improve, then we can alter and we can start to get into face-to-face. But I think there's some really significant challenges. They're not insurmountable. There's a lot of thinking going behind them and behind how we're going to be carrying it forward. But I would say we have got a major challenge on our hands.
Well, thanks for that, Graham, because I would say as an organisation, from the start of COVID, we found our feet and developed new ways of working and actually got out there working. So you're saying we're going to do the same with the pay campaign, within whatever constraints we have to work within, wherever they come, because it's important. Norman, I'm going to go to a different tack with you, unless you desperately wanted to add something to the point Graham made, because I have a different question entirely for you. What would you like?
I could make one very brief thing about what Graham said, and that is quite frank. quite frankly, that this country wasn't prepared for the pandemic. And one of the ways it wasn't prepared was the high number of vacancies that we have. And
Right.
we know that those are projected to get higher. So the fact of the matter is, if we are going to be ready for future pandemics, then we are going to have to be able to recruit enough nurses to provide the services that we know that you all want to be able to provide. And the best way to do that is to respect people by paying them properly for the job they do. We're going to have to train very many more nurses in the UK than we have in recent years, and we're going to have to make the profession one that people feel is valued, and the best way to do that is to pay people properly for it. So if we're going to plug those gaps, that's the reason why people like Erin should understand it's the right thing now for us to ask for a 12.5% pay rise, so that we do make the profession more attractive and we get the right people in.
Great. Before I go to Norman's next question, come on guys out there, give them some more questions. We've only had a couple from you, so get typing. Let's hear them, because I have loads of questions to ask them. So you'll let me get away with keeping asking unless you give a few more. So Norman, this is a very different tack I'm taking here. Unison has claimed that the Cabinet Secretary has agreed to reopen year 3 of the current pay deal. Is this true?
No, it's not true. The fact of the matter is that all of the health trade unions in Scotland did write to the Cabinet Secretary earlier on this year to ask for year 3 of the pay deal, the current year of the pay deal, to be reopened. The basis of that was that the Cabinet Secretary, the Scottish Government had made pay awards in other parts of the public sector that were higher than they had made in the NHS when we had done our 3-year deal 3 years ago. The government declined to reopen year 3 of the pay deal, but that letter remains live with them, that we have all asked for that to happen. But what has happened is that the Cabinet Secretary has corresponded with all of the health trade unions through STAC, which is the group that we do pay bargaining for in Scotland, and has indicated a number of things. One, that they will not be part of the 4-country arrangements, they will not give a remit to the pay review body, and they will aim to sit down and bargain directly with health trade unions, including the Royal College of Nursing, of course, in Scotland. And what the Cabinet Secretary has done is she has indicated a willingness to consider doing the bring forward that I spoke about earlier, which is instead of you getting 12 months pay rise from the 1st of April next year, you might get 15, 16 or 24 months worth of pay rise, however far back she's willing to go. What I would say is that that's not in the public domain yet. The Cabinet Secretary made that offer to STAC in writing, but some of the other trade unions still haven't made arrangements in a 4-country level with their own organisations about whether or not they have permission to pay bargain in Scotland. So personally, I don't think that Unison should have made that announcement. I think it breaches the confidentiality that I think the Cabinet Secretary has the right to expect when she's talking to the health trade unions. We are meeting tomorrow with all of the health trade unions together, and we will hear what other unions' positions are. But the fact of the matter is she hasn't offered to reopen year 3 of the deal. What she has said is she would be sympathetic to our ask to bring forward next year's pay award to make it more than 12 months.
My next question, which is a follow through for you, Norman, and you to a degree you answered some of this already, but so I'm going to ask it again in a different way. But will Scotland get a separate deal to the rest of the UK?
Yes, it's likely that Scotland will get a separate deal to the rest of the UK. It's likely to be close to what the rest of the UK gets, but in the 3-year pay deal, Scotland agreed to pay more than the rest of the UK. So I think that there is a possibility that we could end up with a pay deal again that pays more in Scotland. Now, that negotiation has not happened yet, so I'm not in a position to say that that will definitely be the case. But certainly my job in terms of negotiating for pay in Scotland will be to get everything I possibly can for nurses working in the NHS and indeed in other sectors in terms of their pay rise. We have a Scottish government who, for example, have made different tax raising arrangements in Scotland. They have stated publicly that that's to underpin good public services like the NHS. And I think if we are going to continue to recruit and retain the right people, then we have to pay them properly. And I think the Scottish Government is open to persuasion in relation to that. I would also point out that we will be settling next year's pay rise immediately before the next set of Scottish parliamentary elections. So it's a good time to sit down with politicians who are in power and try and get them to do a good and fair pay rise. So yes, it is likely that the pay rise in Scotland will be different from other parts of the UK, and I would like to think that if we are in direct negotiation that it will be better.
So I'm going to take a comment you made there. I'm going to take this one to you, Graham, which actually this is a pay deal. We're looking for pay for nursing staff in respect of agenda for change. But obviously, as you know, I'm the executive lead for the independent health and social care sector's strategy. If we've got members listening in who are from independent health and social care sectors, what plans have we got for them?
Well, I suppose I should ask you that question, Teresa. Well, I mean, there is a significant challenge because the independent sector is multiple employers across multiple sites, multiple agencies, and all of various types, different shapes, sizes. Everything is in there. If it's not NHS, then it's held within the independent sector. So you've got everything. So it's a real challenge, and the challenge, we've got some recognition agreements across some groups within there, but in the main we don't have recognition agreements as trade unions to negotiate pay with them on a regular basis, and a lot of it is left down to individual types of negotiation which takes place locally. So we have asked as a trade union committee that an urgent piece of work be carried out by the pay working group to look at how we can involve and engage the independent sector within the Fair Pay for Nursing pay campaign, because it does say fair pay for nursing, and our pay policy does say that it's about every sector, whether it's hospital setting, community setting, or care home setting. Every sector where nurses work, nurses deserve a fair pay rise. So it doesn't say, we don't have hashtag fair pay for NHS nursing, it says hashtag fair pay for nursing. So I'm expecting some work to be brought back within the next couple of weeks to the Trade Union Committee in order that we can actually start to direct how that's going to look and how that's going to be taken forward. There's some big pieces of work in there in big chunks. One of them that keeps coming up quite frequently, and I'll just acknowledge the fact, is the GP practice nurses. They are providing what they consider to be NHS services, but because they're under GP direct employment, it's not always the case that is within the NHS framework, if you like. It's not covered by Agenda for Change. So I think that we've got a big, as the way I put it was, it's a very big elephant to eat in a winner. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look at this and see what parts we can break off to make sure that we cover as much as possible within the current pay award as we're going forward. So I look forward to the work, because we recognise 40% of our membership is now within the independent sector.
Thank you. That's great. I'm going to take you a different direction, Graham, and then I'll come to another question for Norman. But what will happen if we don't get the pay award? Are we strike ready, Graham?
That's probably the questions asked the wrong way around, because actually what we are doing now is actually campaigning in order that we can achieve what is a fair pay award for nursing within the NHS. So the reason we've came to the figure of the 12.5% is we believe that to be a fair pay award within within the NHS. So like all pay awards, this is what we're campaigning for, and once we've got that campaign up and running and it's highly visible, then we have to hand that over to our negotiators, and our negotiators will go in and they will negotiate whatever they can. The next part that then comes is basically we have asked for 12.5% and the government tell us that they're going to give us this. Well, I am not in a position as a trade union committee to actually say, yes, I'm going to take that and I'm going to say that that's what we're going to do, unless that figure is 12.5%. So therefore, the next step to that process is we have to go back to our members, and we have to actually speak to our members, engage what our members are saying. You asked for 12.5%, this is what's on offer, what do you want us to do? And we have to work out a way of making that engagement happen. The second part to your question is, are we strike ready? Well, I'll base that on, we've got a history here within Northern Ireland. The nurses in Northern Ireland did take industrial action, and they carried that industrial action through to a successful conclusion, bringing the government back to the table, and actually bringing the government back into formation, but bringing the government back to the table, and they discussed and got a negotiated pay outcome. Things in the UK mainland are different because they're covered under much tighter trade union legislation. So, is the RCN strike ready? From a structural point of view, we have an industrial relations handbook. We also have a strike pay policy. If I had to have a ballot tomorrow, do you think I would? Do I think and do I believe in my heart we could have a ballot and have that ballot successful and to meet the trade union legislation parameters that are set around that? My answer, honestly, is no, not at this moment in time. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to get our members into a place of understanding that that may be a question that's asked of them. And as Norman says, 9-month campaign, that's when that question would be asked of them. So it's about, is the RCN ready? As an organisation structurally, it is. Are our members ready? Is a different question, and I don't think they are at this moment in time. So we have got a job to do, and that will be part of the campaign that we need to take forward.
Thank you. Norman, the next question relates really to what Graham has been saying there, is how can members get involved? What more can members do to get their voices heard and to ensure the campaign is a success?
I think there's lots that members can do to get involved, and what I would urge you as members, ordinary members, is to do just that. Because Graham and I and Teresa in our respective roles, sitting down in front of people from government and talking to them about pay, they're going to go, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But the thing that politicians find really compelling is when ordinary nurses working with patients on a day-to-day basis tell them what their job is like and why they feel that they deserve a 12.5% pay rise. So the fact of the matter is that the convincing of politicians is done as much by the members as it is by the staff or the lay people within the organisation that you've elected to work on your behalf. So get out there and engage with the campaign. Go to the website, keep yourself up to date, come to the webinars, speak to your colleagues about it, speak to the public about it, put stuff on Facebook about it. We said earlier about recording a 1-minute video, and under the pay hashtag that we have, Fair Pay for Nursing. So if you do hashtag Fair Pay for Nursing online, it'll come up with loads of resources, and it will show you other people who have just done just that, made a 1-minute video and said, this is why I deserve a good pay rise. And if thousands or tens of thousands of nurses do that, think about the impact that will have. And one of the things that we really need to harness just now is public support as well. I think the public really for the first time understood the complexity of nursing during the pandemic, and they know now that we are going to have an NHS that's fit for the future, and only if we can persuade people to join and to stay will we have an NHS that's able to cope in the future. So I think ordinary members doing stuff on social media, out there speaking to their colleagues and their families about it, can help build a campaign of pressure that will be irresistible.
Thank you. I'm going to do a follow through with you, Norman, on that. And a question we've been asked is, will we have to sacrifice some of our terms and conditions this time for a pay rise?
Whether we're speaking in a 4-country context or a Scotland context, that could be a little bit different. What I would say to you is that already terms and conditions are different in different areas of the UK. Some of that's a consequence of the 3-year pay deal, where there were some changes that were made both to the structure of Agenda for Change, for example, less increments getting to the top more quickly, but some compromises were made in the other nations, not so much in Scotland. My take on this will be when the government come or the employers come and want to talk to us about reform, we'll be saying we've just done reform. We did it in the last 3-year pay deal, so we don't need to do any of that again. But I'll be taking the position that people shouldn't have to trade terms and conditions to get a fair pay rise. And certainly from a Scotland context, in relation to last time round, although there were some tiny changes to Agenda for Change, they really weren't your terms and conditions of employment. It was things around efficiency, like agreeing to work towards lowering the amount of sickness absence in the NHS, but that was very much concentrated on the processes that would be in place to manage it, rather than, for example, taking sick pay away from people. So all of the things that people hold dear, like sick pay and unsocial hours payments and all of that kind of stuff, off the table in Scotland. Absolutely not a chance that we will be negotiating on them. Highly unlikely that we would go anywhere near any of that on a 4-country basis either.
Thank you. The next question relates back to something both of you have said, but in a way it reflects when we talked about how do we handle the pay campaigns if we end up with more restrictions around COVID. But the question is asking, are we going to have some national days of actions? Graham, sorry, I should have said this is for you. For example, all branches stand outside workplaces on the same day, same time, social distance. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good idea that we can do and we can progress. I think that what we need to be looking at is actually how do we maintain social distancing and create a visible pay campaign. So I think that that's one way of doing it. We need to be collectively, and this is about all nurses and probably all of the NHS, we need to be collectively actually making visible statements wherever we can in the safe environment and in the safety of being in a socially distanced environment. So, wherever there's a platform that's actually a platform that we can stand by and actually say this is for fair pay for nursing, I think we take that opportunity. I think it is a good idea, but I think that what we need to be able to do is to organise that in a way that actually has a degree of impact. So, I'd be sort of concerned if it was just a district general hospital who were doing that just of their own accord. It might grab some local news, but actually it would be much better if it was a coordinated approach. So what I'm saying is nothing's off the table when it comes to that, but I think there's a bit of planning would need to go into actually making that happen and looking how that would be taken forward. So I don't know whether that's the answer you like to hear, Teresa, but it's the answer that I'm going to give you.
You're both going to feel I'm putting you into a tight box here, but these are the questions they're putting because they're getting down to the detail of what they want to understand. So I'm just a person asking the questions now, not framing them before. So the next one for you, Norman. What happens in Scotland if RCM members in England reject the pay deal offered? Can members strike if the Scottish Government says it cannot offer a pay deal until the situation in England is resolved? We've got some right thinking minds going on tonight, haven't we? All the possible dilemmas that might come up in this pay campaign. Norman.
To take strike action, you need to have a dispute and you need to know who your dispute is against. So yes, because the Scottish deal will be tied to the England deal because of the Barnett formula and the money, you could, if there was no settled pay award in Scotland, still have a dispute about the fact that you weren't getting a pay award at the right time for the 1st of April next year. So yes, if the pay deal in England hasn't been agreed and settled, then it is possible that you could have a patent dispute in Scotland related to that. I have to say, I think that what might happen is that the Scottish Government might be more likely to sit down and say that the Scottish Government, for example, would meet any agreed pay award. So the principle would be that they could kind of say, well, you don't really have a dispute here because if you agree it on a 4-country basis, then we'll honour it in Scotland. And what we would be saying to them is if we're having separate pay bargaining in Scotland, that's all fine and well, but what are you going to do to make it better? Because there's no point in having separate pay bargaining in Scotland if all we get is the same as everywhere else. We might as well just stick with a 4-country pay bargaining. So I'll be using that as an opportunity to say to the Scottish Government, you can do that. You can say we will pay whatever is agreed on a UK basis, but what are you going to do better? But could we take action? Yes. But I go back to the question that was asked earlier about industrial action, and strike is a place of last resort. I don't want to ask anybody to go out and strike. Most of our members don't want to go and strike. What you want is a really good campaign that persuades people to make a decent offer, and that's what we have to concentrate on right here, right now, because we're in this for the long haul.
Thank you. Graham, can the grassroots campaign that asks for 15% undermine the RCN's position? Some of our members seem angry that we aren't asking for enough, unlike others who think we might be asking for too much.
There's about 6 questions in there.
Oh, I know. Making you work tonight.
Right, okay. Can the grassroots campaign asking for 15% undermine the RCN's position? No, I don't think that it can, right? Because what that position is it's asking for, and it's creating an awful lot of noise in the system and creating visibility that nurses and the NHS deserve a decent pay rise. So the campaign asking for the 15%, I'm quite happy to stand alongside those guys with my own position of, you know, I'll support the RCN's position of 12.5%. So some members are angry that we aren't asking for enough. Some members are angry that we're not we're asking too much. What I would suggest is we based the bulk of our decision making in creating the 12.5% pay rise based on a membership survey. You'll have heard me saying this before. 42,000 people in the UK responded to that survey, the highest ever response of a survey. Of that, 28,000 of these people were from the NHS, so we have a good representative survey, and those people help to guide our position, as well as taking London economics advice and also some other advice on recruitment and retention within the nursing profession. So we took all that into consideration. I'm very comfortable around the ask that we have made on behalf of the RCN. But anyone that's asking for a substantive pay rise for nursing, we should be able to work alongside them. And that indeed is the position of all of the joint staff side trade unions in the NHS from the NHS Staff Council. So I think I've covered the questions, Teresa.
You have, and you've answered the question I was going to ask you next, because we get asked this all the time, don't we? How did you get 12.5%? And I think you've well answered that from the point of view of the data we have from our members, and that's what informed the thinking within there. Thank you for that. Another question that's come in, this is mainly to do with around the materials that are part of the campaign. So I think both of you can give an answer to this one if you've got thoughts about how we can do that. But another question is about, can we get much more visible campaign materials? No, let me go to the first one, sorry. We can order pay cam materials online. Why not send out these materials to all members? Therefore, we get more member engagement. So it's a kind of a comment rather than a question first off. What do you think? Either of you can happily go for that.
I'd rather
picking you do that, both of you. Go on.
I'd rather send them out to people that I knew were going to use them, and that they didn't sit in someone's inbox or tray of which they weren't. And also, the campaign materials that we're preparing are car stickers, badges, posters for work, and placards. So we need to actually work out, and people need to tell us what they need for their own individual needs, or the branch individual needs. For instance, before they cancelled Glasgow, I had phoned Norman and asked Norman, can you get me 12 placards in order that we can demonstrate within Glasgow? Norman said, yes, no problem. Where will I deliver them to? Glasgow event was cancelled, and I said, not to my house. So I don't, we need to be sort of cognizant of actually giving people some things that are useful to them. So I get the point, and I get the sort of pushing things out in order to reach and to get further reach. But I think there's an equal responsibility on branches to actually reach into their communities. That's what the branch is meant to be able to do.
Thank you. Norman.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we need to remember is that the RCN has got a really good stewards network, and those are people who we provide with all of the messaging and stuff to campaign in relation to pay. So here you are all tonight on this webinar asking questions because you don't know the answer to them. So I could make arrangements for every single person to be sent a badge, or every single member to be sent a car sticker, and they would wear a badge and they would put a sticker on their car. But one of the advantages of sending it, for example, out to reps and branch officials is that they can walk around wards and departments and community nursing places, GP surgeries, and give out the materials, and at the same time talk to people about the campaign, answer the questions they've got, try and encourage them to get involved. So I think sometimes there's an economy of scale of giving it out to people for everybody just to have a badge and a sticker, or do you give it to people who will then walk around, speak to people, talk to them about the campaign, tell them the reason why we're asking for 12.5% and why they should get involved with it personally. And I think that's a better way to go. But yes, you can order campaign material. You can go on and just order stuff and it will be sent to you. But I just think that we should use the resources that we have to go out and speak to members.
But your message is if somebody wanted to have those materials, they can actually go
Anybody
and
can,
order
yes,
them.
absolutely.
And that links to the next question, which is just saying, can we get much more visible campaign materials, much more than previous to elsewhere in Scotland? So obviously a plea to ensure that we are getting the spread of campaign materials to Scotland. It's always a challenge with our geography, isn't it? You know, to get that there. So I think that's more a comment. There's another next question is, Norman, I'll come to you with this one. Would working to rule be a consideration, or does that only come into play when we are formally in dispute?
Only comes into display, it only comes in when you're formally in dispute. The fact of the matter is that I've heard this loose term of working to rule used before, of only working to your job description. I would ask how many of you think you've got an up-to-date job description before we started working to rule anyway. But in actual fact, anything that you do that means that you work differently from how you have been working before could be legally construed as being industrial action. So in actual fact, anything, if you're doing something, you say, well, I'm going to stop doing those things I was doing before, and I'm only going to do these things that are in my job description, that would legitimately be regarded as industrial action if you had been doing the things before. And there's a whole raft of rules that you need to apply before you can take any action. So that's not something that we do at this point in the campaign. And when it comes to the decisions about when you consider doing those types of things, timing is really, really important in relation to this. Bearing in mind that if the UK government use a peer review body process, the peer review body won't even be taking written evidence until November. Right up until Christmas Eve, they're taking written evidence, and it'll be early into the new year before they go out and speak to people in their places of employment, and into the spring before they make a decision. So quite frankly, working to rule 7-8 months out from that is going to make no difference unless you're prepared to do it for 7 or 8 months. And in my experience, people get tired of that kind of thing quite quickly. So I think you have to be careful about when you time doing any of those things. It goes back to the point that Graham was making earlier about demonstrations. Timing is everything. So I think you have to leave with us to come back to you and say, these are the right points that we wish you to take these particular pieces of action if we're required to do them.
So, Graham, I'd like to just bring you in, because those of us who supported the Northern Ireland strike action learnt much about how to enable some of the aspects of that. It was a lot of hard work, wasn't it, both from the members and all the teams working to ensure that we did things right to protect individuals who were wishing to stand up for what they believed in, because in their case it was pay and safe staffing. And I was going to ask you that next, so that's a lead in for you. But if you want to make a comment on what we learnt from Northern Ireland in the context of that, Graham.
There was an awful lot of lessons learned in Northern Ireland, but one of the main lessons that I think that we need to take recognition of is the amount of input from both the RCN staff and the amount of input from the lay representative groups was incredibly high and really, really taxing for them to do that. So therefore, it's a high volume of work that's required to lead in to any industrial action type of any resolution of a dispute via industrial action. Also, what I saw in Northern Ireland, in which we've had feedback of, was the way that the branches interacted with the members. So it's not the representative. The branches were interacting with the members to make sure that the members felt well supported and well prepared. And that actually went into actually making sure that the managers were supported, because the strikes don't happen in the NHS anymore. When I was a boy, they did, right? But they don't. I can't remember the last time that we had industrial action, apart from when we got to Ireland. People are not used to it, and actually nurses, it goes against their natural instinct to withdraw their labour. And that was one of the things that I've had quoted to me. A lot of people required a lot of support because they didn't want to do this. This was a reluctant strike, but one that they carried out because of the necessity of it. So lessons learned, some around structures. We formed our industrial action handbook. We also formed our strike pay policy around that. We also looked at membership engagement and basically all of the things that I've just said there around the emotional turmoil that people went through, and that required a lot of support, not only from the staff but from the lay representatives. Final one on that was the importance of staff and lay representatives working in tandem to achieve an output. I don't think if it was RCN corporately led or workforce led, if you like, from the membership led, I don't think it would have been successful. It required both, and it also required safe staffing to engage the public in that supporting mechanism. If we didn't have safe staffing and it became all about pay, I don't think we would have kept the public on board.
And you've led me into a question I want to put to both of you, because sadly, just recently, someone said to me, I've got the executive lead, you know, for the UK Safe Staffing Programme as well. And someone said they felt that we dropped safe staffing in the context of asking for pay. Norman?
No, absolutely not. These are intrinsically linked, these issues. I mean, from a Scotland perspective, as you know, we have the legislation around safe staffing that has been held in abeyance because of the COVID response. So the progress that would have been made into the implementation has slowed down considerably because of that. But we're in discussion with Scottish Government about picking that back up. But no, pay and safe staffing are absolutely linked. The fact of the matter is that we know that many people are considering leaving the profession because they don't feel valued. We know that we're not recruiting enough people in at the other end to replace them. We're on the cusp of Brexit, where we're not going to have the same opportunity to recruit from a European wide perspective, and there are issues both morally and in terms of numbers from international recruitment. So the fact of the matter is, if you don't have the right number of nurses, then people are going to be tired and they are going to feel undervalued, and they're going to consider whether or not they can continue to work under this amount of pressure. So the fact of the matter is that we need the right number of nurses in the workforce, and one of the best ways to do that is to show them that you value them properly by paying them well for the job that they do. So safe staffing has absolutely not been dropped. The legislation in Scotland has been enacted. We are working with Scottish Government in relation to the guidance around that, but we need to keep on making the link that one of the best ways to make sure that people want to join the profession is by making sure they feel valued when they do, and a lot of the time that's about their pay.
Do you want to add anything to that, Graham?
No, I concur with what Norman was saying there. You know, it's about valuing nurses, and it's about political choices that are being made here, and it's about actually providing leadership, because actually there's a moral obligation on a country and a country's leadership to look after the people that it's actually and looking after the sick and vulnerable in society. That's their moral obligation. Yeah. And nurses play so important a role within that. The other aspect that Norman didn't say was actually when nurses start to get fried, and nurses start to get fried, they become unwell, and they become unwell, and actually that actually takes them out the workforce on a temporary basis as well. And one of the things that we are working on very, very closely is around actually maintaining the health and safety side of the workforce as well, in particular along the mental health line, which has basically been significantly challenged with COVID, and the amount of distraught people that I think every representative has met over the last 5 months has been incredible. I've never experienced it like it before in my time as being a rep with the RCN. We are meeting very distraught people, and those distraught people cannot attend their work because of the lack of support. So it's all interlinked together. We need to actually make sure that.
Understanding the impact of the well-being. There's a comment that's been made here, which it says we should be shouting out about staffing and pay. I think what's important for me here is when people ask me where staffing is, I think we've got to find a way of making sure that we are clear, because it's both together. Because one without the other, which you've both argued, is not the way forward within there. I'm going to make another comment that was written. I'll see if I can read this out correctly. But we are loving Graham's webinars and mantras. The Ashens should create a wee book of revisms. I don't know if I could cope with that, Graham. Anyway, I thought I'd read that one out as a comment. Okay. I'm going to actually, we've only got a few minutes to go, so I'm actually going to move to a closing question, allow both of you to have freedom to answer in whatever way, so I won't control the both of you or ask you a specific way. So over to you. What would be your take-home message to members who are stressed with COVID and now fighting for a pay rise? It links to what you just said, Graham, there, but both of you. Graham, start with you, and I'm going to actually answer this one too. So,
my take home for members is that do not lose hope. And I firmly believe that if we campaign effectively and we campaign with the vim and vigour that I know is within every single member, and if we capitalise on the emotion that people actually feel towards both items that we're talking about here, pay and safe staffing, and if we look after each other through this period of time, we will come out of the other end of this, and we will come out of the other end of this with, I believe, better staffing and also better pay for nursing. So my message is continue to nurture that hope, because it's actually that hope can become a reality.
Thank you. Norman?
Yes, it's about this in the context of COVID. And I think back to the courage and dedication that nurses showed during the height of the pandemic, coming into their work, separating themselves from their families, the pressure that they were under, the very, very distressing high levels of activity that they had to deal with, and the fact that the public got right behind them. And I think people really understood the value of nurses. They stood on their doorsteps and clapped for you. And that's a really heartening thing, that you can see that the public support you so much. I'm conscious of the fact it looks like we're about to face a second wave of COVID. So it's really, really tough. But what I would say to you is, in terms of your pay, there is probably no better opportunity for you to tell the people that make decisions about your pay why it's important that they show the value that they said they would when they stood on their doorsteps clapping. So, as I said earlier, people like me are expected to talk about your pay. I'm expected to bang on about your pay all of the time. But if you guys really want to be involved in this campaign, then put some effort and energy into doing just that, telling the people in power that now is the time to stop clapping and start paying.
So for me, the answer to your question is also just where Norman linked is about how we keep the public understanding the significance and value and contribution of nursing along with others in terms of delivering the services through COVID. But the most important promise I can make to you is we will work like we did as both a staff team and our members in our governance processes to deliver the services, to give you the support and whatever you need as we go into a second wave. We have huge resources built up through the first wave of COVID. We now, sadly, like you, have a great understanding of what it takes to work within a pandemic environment. We now have the learning that we never had before about what that means. But most importantly, take note of the mental and health and well-being services that are available to you, and take care of yourselves and each other, because there's a lot of anxiety among the people that you will be taking care of, and a lot of anxiety in the public that are around you. And sometimes they actually can feel that they're at odds with each other for everybody. So it's really important that you do take care of yourself, and know, as members, that's what the RCN is there for you in these times. Now, there are questions we didn't get to, but I hope that we've covered most of the points that have been made, and I'm actually going to, at this point, just say thank you to Norman for joining us tonight. And not sure about the Graham mantras, not sure what they are. You'll have to tell me, Graham.
Well, me and Norman could have a conversation about them, but they're mantras of a different type.
I'll be watching for the book to be published, Graham, afterwards. But anyway, thank you, Graham, for taking yet another time out of a long day to come back this evening and talk to people. So with that, I'm going to end our session here. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.